Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and these are Charter Moms Chats, where we go live to share information that will help families with their school search, finding the right schools for their kids. And often we're featuring a particular school, but today we're talking about the school search process. And my guest today is Anna Koalenz, who is one of the most diligent school search moms that I know of. And she talked to a writer and shared her story on the SA Charter Moms blog today. So that's sachartermoms.com. So I encourage everybody to read Anna's story, and you could find out about how big her spreadsheet was and how many school tours she went on. And but since this time of year, it's we're getting ready for another enrollment season, and so I wanted like the next generation of families, doing it for this coming year, to hear Anna's story and maybe get some inspiration about like how she was looking out for her son. So let me tell you a little bit about Anna's family. So she has two kids, Beau and Magnolia, and his name is Buck. And I'm so grateful. Like it's been a joy to keep in touch with you along the way, and I'm just so grateful that you can share your story on the blog and now in the interview.
I'm really excited and thank you so much for having me. You you have helped me so much through this. So I feel like we were like hand in hand for a while through this. So I really appreciate all the advice and it's kind of culminated to this. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I was wondering, can you kind of describe your family in a nutshell? Like, I don't know, do you have like a family mission statement? Like, kind of how you describe your family?
We don't have anything official, but I think we do go through periods of time where we hit on like different themes. And one of the ones that we've been hitting on for a long time over time is everything good takes effort. And you keep trying, you keep learning, and be positive and gracious during that period. And that's been something that's really important, I think, for our kids to learn. We think it's really important. And it's important for us as adults to continue to remember. So yeah, that's one area that I would say it's not really a motto, but it's one area that we talk about a lot.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice, and that's one of the key things that if we can pass on that kind of mindset to our kids, that's going to really help them to succeed in life. Like it's not enough just for education to transmit information, but it's also be able to stick with it even when things get hard. And
Right.
yeah, and that's knowing that everything good takes effort. That's a good thing for families to keep in mind when they do a school search because it is harder to choose something other than your neighborhood school,
Yes.
but the payoff can be tremendous because a lot of kids, for my kids and for your kids, they're all unique, and sometimes a school that's meant to serve all kids, some kids just aren't all kids.
Right. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, so well, what are some things that you kind of noticed about your son Bo that you realize like, this kid's kind of unique, like it might be a little more difficult to find the right school for him.
Yeah. So one thing about Beau, and I think this is mentioned in the article, is that he's a very energetic and active kid. He's very happy and he has a lot of personality, but he has so much energy and trying to fit that into a box of the school day can be really hard. So that was one thing that we really looked heavily at and kind of knew early on that he was gonna require an a school that would support him being able to move around and be active and give opportunities for positive activity throughout the day. Um, that was, something we knew was gonna be really important, and then also, he kinda has the curse of being the first child, and he tends to be a little bit of a perfectionist, and is he can be very hard on himself. And so we also had concerns with that because when you have someone who is used to being good at something the first time they try it, but they get frustrated when they're not good at it. And our whole thing was growth mindset. And so finding a school that would stretch him without breaking and also allow him or use techniques that were very positive to continue that mindset of like just keep going. That gritty mindset was something we were really looking for, but it had to include like a lot of positivity because too much like reprimanding and that kind of stuff really would get him down. And so uh, we saw that early on. It was just one of the hallmarks of his personality. So those were two things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something I think a lot of parents I've talked to have mentioned similar characteristics in their kid. I think you just were able to like identify it and verbalize it at an early stage. I mean, sometimes families discover that partway through elementary school and realize, oh my gosh, we're on the right path. We're on the wrong path. We need to do something different.
Right.
But for you all, it was like I guess searching for a preschool. Like that was kind of one of the first steps you did, where you realized like, okay, we know Beau better than anybody, you and Buckdude, so you're in the best position to find a school that's gonna be the right fit for him.
Yeah. You know, I will say that we kind of went through this whole thing where it's like, okay, well, what's the best school? Just what's the best school blanket statement. And we went that route, or what we thought was that route for Beau with his first like real preschool experience. And we really tried to like push through it. And it was like, oh, he'll adjust. Kids are resilient. That was kind of our mindset. And I actually don't think that's as true as it's touted. I think that there's a lot of times where kids need a lot of supports in order to be resilient, and you have to have enough positivity in order to feel comfortable to grow. And that was not really something I had ever thought before that experience. And so we wanted something that was going to be after that. We were like, okay, well, something has to change. And we were looking for a school that would support his energy without it being very um like negative. And we found out through the charter moms group about the Will Smith Zoo School. And because we were looking for a quick change, I immediately went and toured, and I was lucky enough that we got in when there was happened to be an opening, which aren't normally just like open spots on the roster there. And we loved it. We really enjoyed the nature-based curriculum there. That's where I learned more about all of the positive things that come with nature-based education. But when the pandemic hit, we realized pretty quickly, with schools kind of deciding to do online presence for kindergarten, we knew that that was not going to be a good fit for Beau. And I also didn't feel like I could homeschool him at that point. With my career and everything, I didn't feel like I could support that and work. And so we started looking into preschools that also offered a private kinder option. And we were lucky enough also through your group to find the Acorn School. And I have to say, both were really great, but we have really loved the Acorn. I mean, it was life changing for Beau. Their approach to social emotional learning, their approach to giving kids the opportunity to be children and play-based learning was a huge game changer for us. And we had such an amazing experience. So we did like a gift of time class with them, and also did private kindergarten. So Beau, we kind of redshirted him, if you will, through them, but we were really, really happy with that decision. And it was very positive, and I'm so glad that I heard about it on the group, because not being from San Antonio or Alamo Heights area, where a lot of people have heard of the school and know of it and it has this legacy, we didn't. And so it was really great to learn about it there.
Yeah, well, that's my excuse to plug the San Antonio Charter Moms discussion group. I put the link up on the screen, but if anyone just listening on the podcast, so if you it's facebook.com/group/SA Charter Moms discussion, or you just search SA Charter Moms, the group will pop up. And one thing I've noticed about the group is that there's really healthy discussion about early childhood and preschool, because that's a really key time. Families are very engaged, and and then that like crowdsourcing aspect of the group, like I learn a
Yes.
ton of stuff in it. Like I try to share what I know, but I'm just in awe of like what people in the group share and how
Yeah.
positive they are. And like I remember, so like 9 years ago, the group was about a year old and we cracked 100 members, and I was so excited. And I thought, well, people will come and then they'll solve their issue and then they'll probably move on. Like they'll probably leave the group or become inactive. And then what's happened is people stay because they want to share what they've learned, like, so like the families whose younger kids went to Acorn, and then now they get to tell other families about Acorn. Like, they become those, like, promoters of, the best schools in San Antonio, and that's yeah,
Yes.
that's really exciting.
Yeah. I have to say the discussion group, in any Facebook group, you're gonna encounter a little bit of snark, but I have to say that the Facebook group really does this amazing job of keeping discussion healthy. And one thing that you'll learn if you start looking through schools is a lot of websites do not really show the essence of what they do or their differentiators. I don't know what it is, but they're just not that great at like describing what that is. But go into the SA Charter Moms group and you can find those differentiators pretty quickly and people will break it down. And you also learn, again, there's like this I think when you first look at schools, this bias of like, this is the best school, and this blanket statement of this is the
Right,
best.
right.
But once you kind of explore that group, you really learn that there's not a best school, there's a best school for your child. And so the advice you get is really healthy around, well, yeah, this school is known for being good, but this is what it offers, and these are the downfalls of it. And so you have to decide if that's the right fit for your child. And so I think that's so healthy. And I love that there's so much healthy discussion around that because it's not just like, oh, well, we were ranked the best. It's really a healthy discussion of this is the type of child that will thrive here.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's such a key point. That question does come up, like, okay, what are the best schools? Like, people want some kind of ranking, and like, we have a blog post, or like, if you go to SHR Moms, click on articles and search best schools,
Yeah.
we have a post that comes up. But what it really is it's just a set of tools. So, right, there's the school report cards, there's different ranking systems, like, there's all these tools out there, and like, so we'll share that, and but like you said in the group, try to break down, like, okay, these are kids who do well at this type of school, these kids who do well at that type of school, and and every it seems like every school, like, in my experience, like, it'll get most things right, but then there's like something missing, like, oh, maybe
Right.
not enough STEM at that school, or maybe not enough arts at that school. And so, like, then it's kind of up to the parent to kind of supplement, and listen to your kids' interests. Like, the older they get, the more they express themselves about what their goals are. So yeah, it's like, you said it very well. There's not a best school. There's a best school for your child, and that's what the school search is about, right? And that's why, like, you cast such a wide net, right? Like, so can you
Yes.
talk about your spreadsheet?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I cast the net really wide. I kind of was like, what does San Antonio have to offer? And there's so much that I was like, I mean, there were definitely times when I got, overwhelmed, but really the only criteria was, like, it can't be more than, like, 45 minutes one way because I don't think that's really doable. There were a couple schools that we did add to our list, though, that were past that point just by a tad because we liked them so much whenever we talked to them, and so but I kind of started using what you had offered and then adding in private schools as well, and I was like, "You know what? I wanna know all my options." I'm kind of that person, I'm like, "Give me all my options. I have to do the research, I have to comb through it." And what I kinda did is, like, if I could build the perfect school for Beau, like, what would that look like? If I had a school that completely catered to Beau, like, what would that look like? And so then I started, like, listing out that criteria, and then I'd kinda go through and I'd like, "Okay, well, how does this fit?" Do what do the moms say on the group? And then when I go, like, give them a call, what do they have to say about this? And what's the feel that I get for them? And so, there were a lot of different categories. Like for us, it was like, okay, how much recess time is there? Is there daily PE? Because for us, daily PE for someone as active as Beau and with ADHD, we know that exercise impacts our brains really positively. We wanted that. And so, was that available? What was the class size? Because, a lot of places will say, like, oh, it's 1 to 15, but you really find out it's like 30 to 2. And so, it's like two teachers
Right.
in the classroom, which is works for some people. But if you're easily distracted, maybe it's not the best for you. Um, and so there were a lot of things like that that we looked at. And I mean, we built all kinds of criteria, and then I just kind of would go in and rank. And then after every school I met with, I'd kind of like rearrange. I'd be like, okay, this is my top now, and this is, whatever it is. And so that was really interesting. And I kind of scored out these schools, but you still end up kind of going with yes, this thing scored it all, but like what is like what's the essence of the school?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really key, the essence. Well, and you mentioned, like, going like, you were able to narrow down your list and then, like, actually go on school visits. So,
Yeah.
yeah, can you share more about, I think, like, sometimes feel like, it comes up in the group, is like, like, "Oh, you can visit the school." It's like, yes, like, that's, like,
Yes.
a really essential way to, I mean, we have the school discovery day events, which are, which I don't think those helped you, the time frame wasn't right, but, um, like, people can at least interact across a table, with a
Yeah.
bunch of schools in one day, but, like, you were able to actually go on how many school tours did you go on?
We did 16. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Oh, I mean, honestly, and I fit them in all over the place. It was like if a school was saying, "We're having an open house at 6:30 tonight," I was like, "All right, in the car, like, let's go." Um, and so it was really important to me because, like I said, one, as much as, um schools are good at, like, laying out the basics of their curriculum, it's really hard to figure out, like, what their differentiators are, and I think that's, like, a marketing thing, but I don't they just struggle with it, right? And so you just don't know until you visit, and some schools like, we even looked in Bulverde because 'cause we're in Stone Oak, we looked, we considered, all around San Antonio, but we really did, like, I set up some virtual tours, we went into several schools, we were able to, visit some charter schools, and, some of those were open houses, and then I kinda, fight my way into, like, being able to ask the questions that I have, but that was really important, like, visiting the schools, um, made a big difference in how I felt about them after that, which obviously had narrowed down my list. You can't visit all the schools unless you just
Mhm.
like are that becomes like a full-time position or something for you. It's just not possible, but it was really great to get to visit so many and it was very eye-opening to see like, visiting a school during a school day is very different than visiting for an open house too. That looks different because you don't really get to see how the kids interact and how that works, but you do kind of get a better feel for, like, what they offer because they're not having to focus on all the other stuff too, and so that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's pros and cons, right? So, like,
Yeah.
if it's an open house or an information night, then they have a presentation. They're specifically, like, trying to communicate with parents, right? So you get a lot of information. If there's a Q&A, you can get your questions answered, right? But, like, yeah, being able to, like, observe a class in action is really amazing. I think once somebody it goes on as many school tours as you've been on, like, you start to see patterns of, like, oh, these kids are really paying attention to their teacher, or like this kid
Right.
seem really relaxed, like or like, wow, look what a great playground they have. Like, so there's those things you kind of learn to look for.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. There were so many things that we saw in like some schools that you could tell were just a little bit more structured than I think would have been appropriate for Beau. You could tell, like, their folders were filled with, like, worksheets versus, like, those hands-on experiences, which is not again, every child learns differently, and for some kids, that kind of information works really well, but I wanted to see, like, a good mix of that, and so that was really important to me too, is kinda like, "Okay, like, what are the kids like? What do their folders look like, or their cubbies look like? Are they full of worksheets, or
Mhm.
are they does it look like there's lots of materials available to the class to be able to do hands-on?"
Yeah. You made a good point about, what school websites are like, that,
Yeah.
like, they'll typically cover, like, the basic information, but it's almost like they're designed to, like, not have any negatives or not have any turnoffs, but then
Right.
in some ways it takes away those differentiators, and
Yeah.
then, we try, like, in the enrollment guide blog post, or well, let's see, this is my chance to plug, like, so if you go to the SHRM's website, there's the guide page, takes you to, like, it's an alphabetical list of the charter schools, so I know that's a helpful tool. That has links to our enrollment guide blog posts, and we try to put in, like, the stuff that we feel like is missing on the school websites.
Right.
But then, like, the group, and then, or like the questions you get to ask, like, about recess minutes, or like some families ask, like, oh, how early is drop off, or how late is after school care, or those specific things. Like, we can't cover everything in the enrollment
Yeah.
guide, and so, like, be able to go and ask your questions is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, very true.
Yeah. Well, did you have thoughts about, or like, so if there's a family that like kind of has like their wish list of schools that they're curious about, like how did you narrow it down? I guess like you said it was kind of a ranking process, like you try to get answers to your questions of like, okay, is this how close is this to the ideal school for
Mhm.
Beau, right? And then kind of rank things that way.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think having a spreadsheet or some way to, like, to give a numerical value to something is very helpful. Just like, I mean, we did the same thing when we were looking at homes and that kind of stuff. Like, you just kind of have to figure out what's the most important to you and then rank it. And then you kind of get a feel because sometimes I would be like, oh, this sounds like such a good school because they were enthusiastic or whatever. But then you're like, kind of get in the nitty gritty and you're like, well, but they don't offer sports and they only have one recess. They only do PE every other day, kind of thing. And so then it was like, well, maybe this isn't actually like, yes, they're enthusiastic and we really like that, but there is like the practicality of the day to day that has to get like weighed into it. And we realized like, oh, you know what, this one probably shouldn't be on the list anymore, as unfortunately. And so uh, that ranking system and like kind of coming up with those like these are really important to us. This is kind of important. This is like a nice to have, and if anyone ever needs help with like an Excel spreadsheet, feel free to reach out because I love that kind of stuff. And like I think it is there's not necessarily tools out there for for people like doing that. And I have experience in that area, but it's just one of those things where you have to decide what's important and then kind of write it all out and figure out like a way to do that. And when we were trying to narrow down that list, I mean, that was really hard for us because there were certain so many things that were like, "Oh, well, this would be a nice to have, and this would be a nice to have." And I know we had a question. I remember having a call with you where I was like kind of freaking out. I'm like, I have so many options, like I don't know where to start. And we kind of had a really healthy discussion around that. And I was like, okay, you know what? Start with like the top, the ones that like, okay, these sound like they're my ideal, and then like work my way backwards if I feel like that's not enough. And so that was kind of I kinda had to work through that too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this, since, like, I have teenagers, and so we're starting to do college visits and stuff, and thinking,
Yeah.
time to start a spreadsheet." Right now, I just have a
Yeah.
list of sort of qualitative information, but the spreadsheet idea is great because it, like, it's an analytical way to, make sure you're putting more weight on the most important factors because there are a lot of nice to haves, but, when it comes down to it, it's focusing on those top priorities and make sure those needs are met.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that it's a very, helpful tool if you're kind of someone who gets caught up in like, "Well, this has this and this has that." I know I get like that. So I'm like, "I have to put this in numerically. There's no way."
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned that, like, you put a bunch of charter schools on your list, but then you also put private schools on your
Yeah.
list. So I was wondering if you could kind of comment on, like, families who are kind of looking at the trade-offs between charter schools and private schools.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we know both are great. Um One thing about charter schools that I think we all can agree with is the fact that they're typically tuition free is really nice, and it frees up the funds to be able to supplement your child's education in a lot of different ways. And that is definitely like a very big pro of charter education. Um, and so I think that that's probably was, like, my biggest thing is, like, well, if we went charter, like, we'd have funds, but then we kinda got to the point where it's like, how much time do we really have after school? Do we want to, like do we wanna fill up all of that time and, like, try to find all of these other things to try to supplement on top of, like, a long school day? Maybe, maybe not. And so, charter schools also kind of fall under that like preset state standards to some extent. And there is something that makes the private school not having to do that. Like there's certain benefits to it because they can approach things a little bit differently. It's not necessarily taught to a test, which I know a lot of the schools work really hard not to do that. Um, but we know that it does happen to some extent, even, the ones that try really hard not to. If you're kind of given the standard that you have to meet, unfortunately, you're given it's a guideline that you have to follow. So, I also think like one thing that we've learned about the private school experience, and I do think some charters probably offer this, but the community itself is very unique. Like having a community of people who are very highly involved, um, who really are interested in like being able to shape the curriculum of their kids, like it is just a different feel to it. And there were some charter schools on our list that we were really impressed with, and I thought that they had a really good community, but it's still this is not something I can put into words. It's just a different feel. And after we've made that decision, it's a different feel. Like there's not anything, they don't really compare exactly apples to apples on that. So,
Yeah, yeah. No, those are really good points. Yeah, that this is something that sometimes people get aren't this is a learning curve for folks about, what's different between a traditional public school, a charter school, and a private school. Is that right?
mhm,
So the traditional public schools and the charter schools are both tuition free, and they all have to follow the TEKS, and they have to administer the STAR test. Charter schools have a little more flexibility in how they implement it, but like you said, they still have to follow that guideline. They have to cover the TEKS, and they are evaluated based on how students do on the standardized test. So you've got school report cards you can look at, but also charter schools, if they fail for 3 years, they can be shut down for
right.
getting low scores. So, but like private schools are, yes, they charge tuition, but no, they're not tethered. They don't have to follow the TEKS. They're accountable to the families and to their board, but they're not accountable to the state in the same way.
Right.
And that, and then that that community, um, like in some ways, it's almost like I feel like there's like a continuum of like a customer service orientation, right? Whereas like the traditional
Right.
public schools are sort of like, well, you live here, you're stuck
Yeah.
with us, right? Whereas like
Yeah.
charter schools, like they're trying to attract students from the whole metro area, so they're more customer service oriented. But there's a limit to what they can do because they're trying to make it work on what money they get from the state. And then whereas private schools, it's like there's such an investment of time and energy and resources from the families who are committed to the school, like from alumni,
Mhm.
the just and the like the traditions and right. So like San Antonio Academy, like it's been
Yes.
around for over 100 years, right?
Yes. Yeah. And You know, it's kind of funny. San Antonio Academy was the second school we toured, and, everything I tell you, every school we looked at ended up we're comparing it to that because it was such a phenomenal, tour that, like, my husband and I kept just, like, looking at each other and we're like, "This just sounds perfect for Beau. Oh my gosh, this sounds perfect for Beau." And, of course, like, I feel like for us, we were like, "Okay, well, can we find the same thing without paying tuition?" And so we kept kind of looking, and I think there was, like, that due diligence of, like, "Okay, well, we're really happy with the tour, but, like, let's continue to look." And, it's I have to say the the experience at San Antonio Academy in just the few weeks we've been there has been, like, so impressive. Um, One area that I feel like they're just so different from other schools is that they keep their goals in mind, like, every moment. So, their chapel every day talks about their school mottos and, like, what's important to them, and it really kinda just continues to hit home, like, be be honest, be kind, be the best you can be. We look for scholarship, we look for I mean, every day they talk about these things, and I think a lot of schools will get excited about new ideas and kind of start to implement it, and then it, like, fizzles, and I think that's hard, right? Because you're spread kinda thin, and unless you have, like, a very intentional program, it's easy to slip out of those things, but the academy has been just really impressive in the way that they maintain that, and, they do offer one of the most thoughtful programs that we experience, like, everything is set up for boys to thrive, and that's so unique, and especially, in this day and age where I think boys tend not to be the, like, ideal student in a lot of classrooms, and especially, like, someone like Beau, I just knew, like, I was like, "If Beau goes to a traditional school, he will be that kid, we will be getting calls all the time," and, like, we talk about this a lot. It's just a learning opportunity, it's okay, but it does start to weigh on their self-image and that kinda stuff if you're in trouble all the time or if you're a disruption or whatever it is that doesn't fit that mold. And so where could we find a school that like the mold was preset for something that he would thrive in? And so the academy really offers that for boys and we've been really happy and they do have wonderful traditions. They have some things that really differentiate them, like their lunch program where the older boys serve the younger boys have to clean up after themselves. Like that's very unique. There's a lot of fraternity, there's a lot of self-responsibility that I think takes place. And that's essentially what we wanted Bo to learn. And they're doing it every single day. Um, and, things like I'm trying to think all of all the things that we went through that stuck out to us. One of the things too was the fact that so many alumni will come back and speak to the boys. Like once a week they get an alumni come. And I just think that it's a K through 8 school. Like that's just unheard of to have people who care enough to go back to their school on a continuous basis and say, "Hey, boys, this is like my experience. This is how this has shaped my life." And I thought that was really special. I'm like, if you can get that many people to come back and say, "This place shaped my life for the best," then who am I to argue with that?
Yeah, that's really incredible. Yeah. I love hearing you talk about San Antonio Academy because I know how hard you worked to,
Yeah,
but good things take hard work, right? But how hard you worked on the school search and just like how much love you have for Bo,
yeah,
like you really want to protect him. But you have high expectations for him. You want him to work hard. You want him to be caring and kind towards other people, but you don't want him in a situation where there's so much structure or like he's being told he's a bad kid or something
yeah,
because like that happens to boys. Like it happened to my son in kindergarten. Like he was like, "Oh, like," and they just kept sending him to a different room. It's like, "Oh, we just can't deal with you." It's like, man,
y-
like who
yes.
does that to a kid?
I,
Like you don't like. Thankfully, my son doesn't remember it, but
y-
I want yeah, maybe he doesn't fit the mold, but he's got a lot to give to the world. He just needs some guidance, like to shape him the right way.
yeah, and especially, like for kids like Bo, yes, they have high energy, but they're also uber curious. They're very like Bo is the type of kid who like always is enthusiastic about learning. Like he's gonna get all the kids going and like learning their numbers too, because he's like, yeah, I'm ready for this. And so you of course like it's not just bad behavior and like we knew that it wasn't just like him being some like defiant or whatever else. It was like he was just struggling and we needed a school that like um could do a good job of having their structure set up so that we're not looking for all kinds of accommodations just for him, which is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Accommodations are a wonderful tool. But if you can find a setup that's already encompassing these things and you're not having to worry as much about the accommodations, I think that's a really positive thing because you know that they're set up for that environment anyway. Um, and yeah, we did. We fought hard for it and were really happy with our decision and the boys have been great with Bo. I mean, a lot of these boys have been together since pre-K, so we were a little bit worried, like, how is he gonna do entering a new friend group that's already well established? And, you kind of hear that, like, oh, we went to a smaller school, but they already knew each other, and so it was hard for my kid to break in. But we have not had that issue at all. Um, like the boys are genuinely kind, and we've had a really good experience so far. And the teachers are great, and there's just so many like merits to this program, and I wish that more programs in the city would look to them as a model because it really is so truly unique in the way that their focus on the boys and I think a lot of their approaches could work for girls too in the classroom. It's just I think girls kind of aren't seen as needing those kind of things, but of course, like active time is important for anybody. It's important for our health. It's an important lifelong habit, and things like that that aren't necessarily in every school out there. So
Yeah, there are a few tuition-free single-sex schools in San Antonio. So they like young, and but
yeah,
the problem is they weren't within driving range for you.
no,
But like Young Men's Leadership Academy
yeah,
in SAISD is a choice school, so it's open to anybody willing to drive there. It's just not
yeah,
practical on it, right? And then actually Edgewood ISD Schools of Innovation, they have an all-boys school and an all-girls school. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, so it's sort of it's a trend that, right, and then like Young Women's Leadership Academy
hmm,
in SAISD. So it's something, it's out there, and yeah, single sex education. It's part of the variety of what's out there, and that's what's so fun for me is like the education researcher is I get to find all these really interesting models, and they help share it with families so that they can go, hey, maybe that's could be what we need for our kid.
yeah. I agree. I think that it's nice to have that option here in San Antonio, and I'm so glad that they were within driving distance because I did kind of look and consider some of the others, but it was like, oh my gosh, that drive would not be feasible. He'd be miserable by the time he got home. And so we're really lucky and feel really blessed. But there's so many. I feel also like a lot of peace because we kind of went into this and we're like, this is our top choice. But if things don't work out, there's some other great schools in the city. And I don't think it won't work out because we really did a lot of diligence behind it and we've had a great experience so far. But there really are so many options in San Antonio, and I wish that everyone like knew about all of them, because there's so much to go around. And I definitely grew up in a town that did not have that. Smaller town, we did not have lots of school options. So
Yeah. Well, that's why, like, I'm so glad that we could have, this guest post and this conversation at this time of year, because like we're looking ahead towards enrollment season. So like November through February is the main open enrollment season for most charter
yeah,
schools, but some are earlier. Like Idea Public Schools is already taking applications, and Great Hearts and
yes,
Bases have kind of earlier deadlines for their lotteries. So that's, yeah, like that's, I mean, that's our big push this year, is just make sure more families are aware that they have these choices, and that there's a time frame, during open enrollment to get their applications in. So, do you
yeah.
have advice for families who are like, kind of like 1 year behind your process, like, and they're doing a school search? That maybe it's like use a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, use a spreadsheet, yes. I think, looking early is important so that you have the time and luxury to like really evaluate everything and not feel super frazzled. But also, I think imagining the perfect school for each of your children and then kind of aligning that criteria and making sure that when you are visiting schools you're armed with questions and really trying to get to the bottom of like how are you doing what you say that you do, like how are you making sure that this is happening, because a lot of schools will um like a traditional school will say like we do X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, well, how? And there's a little bit of like hesitation. They're like, well, we just do. And you're like, well, how? And so I think having that list of questions is really important, kind of getting down to um to what's important to you, but also like what's the best fit for your child because you want them to be stretched some, but you don't want them to
Yeah.
break, right? So like you look at programs that are like super intense academically. Well, that sounds great, but there's like a limit, right? Like maybe that's great for all kids or for some kids, but like not for others. And so you always want them to have growth, but not to be like anxious, like stress balls because of it, or just really falling behind or feeling like they can't do it. And so there's a lot of like kind of evaluating like what's the upper limit and the lower limit for meeting these needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you make a really good point. I think parents should feel like it's like, okay, parents, Ann and I, we're giving you permission. Be assertive. Ask
Yes.
follow-up questions. Like, don't be shy about asking questions, because that's all you'll find out. And you want to find out beforehand because every time you move a kid to a different school, that causes stress, that
Yeah.
they have to make new friends and adjust to a new environment. And like as much as possible, you want to try to get it right each time you make a change. And
Ye
yes, they're going to age out, right? So the Acorn School ends after first grade or ends after kindergarten, right? So first grade you had to make a change, and San Antonio Academy ends at eighth grade. So for high school, you have to make it, figure something out. But but you can deal with that when it comes. But as you make each choice, like you want it to be one that everyone in the family is going to be happy with, right? Where they can stretch and grow, but not feel anxious or just crushed or have a negative self image.
Right. Yeah, and, it's okay to, like, change schools. If something's not working, like, don't be afraid to leave, but, yeah, doing the due diligence, like, it really does give you a lot of peace, and, yeah, be assertive because, I'll tell you, not necessarily with this school search, but when we were looking, like, for daycares, for example, I remember having, like, my list of questions, and one school is just, like, I remember them, like, kinda rolling their eyes like, "Oh my gosh, this is so exasperating," and I'm like, "That's not." You don't want that, like, you want somebody
Yeah,
who's gonna be able to handle your family and, like, the things that you're wanting for your child, and, I think that's few and far between, but you also can see, like, how open they are to your, like, "Okay, well, these are our unique, plights," and are they open to kind of saying like, "Well, yes, we offer something for that," or are they not? Because we did get some responses that was like, "Well, we don't really do that." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. I'd rather know now, and that's
mhm,
okay, but that means it's not a fit for us." So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, better to find out sooner. And yeah, and I think what you said about start early, like
Yeah.
that's really good advice. I mean, I guess one thing I should mention is like charter schools don't carry their waiting list over year to year. You have to reapply every year. So
Right.
starting, you can start the research early, but you can't really apply more than like a year earlier. But yeah, but like if a family has like a 4-year old and they're trying to choose a kindergarten, now is like the optimum time to
Yeah.
be doing. Yeah, make your list, go on school visits, have time to think it over and keep asking questions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Having plenty of time, and then, I mean, for the schools that you really like, you might end up touring again because by the time that you, like if you're starting early enough, you're probably like, "Okay, let me do one more last check in my top 3," or whatever, whatever it is, and but you want that time because, I think what's really stressful for us is when we were really kind of evaluating more of the charter schools, and I was looking at those dates. It's like, well, some of them you have to know before you can even, applying this one's opening and this one's already telling you yes or no, and that was kind of stressful. So if you have someone like on your list that's really high ranking and their lottery is not until later in the year, then what are your backups? Because you kind of have to like backwards engineer all those dates to figure out like, okay, so you have to know early, otherwise you do kind of go through that period where like, oh, we missed the lottery for this, or this was our top school choice. Their lottery's later in the year, but we didn't get it, and now we don't have a backup, and you just don't want to be in that position. So,
Yeah, yeah. One thing in praise of the discussion group is like it's a really great place to like kind of game out those scenarios, of
yes.
I mean, that's one thing that like yeah, it's like I'm really grateful for like the people in the group who care for each other and will say and like somebody will say, "Well, I'm really confused. This is my situation." And then, other members will say, "Okay, it's gonna be okay. Do
Yeah.
this, this, and this. Just and then in a month you'll find out this. You can make it. Like okay, okay, we got it. And
Yeah.
yeah, because the waiting lists and the lotteries and stuff, it is really stressful. But at least like there are a lot more choices than there were 10 years ago. I can testify to that because I was my son was in the lottery in the 2013 2014 time frame to start 2014, and he got waitlisted, and it was really stressful. I really didn't have a backup except to keep homeschooling. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's, the perfect example of starting early. And like even with, you have to consider too for private schools, there are entry exams most of the time at certain levels. And so you do have to consider, I mean, while it might not be very likely, I think the higher that they get in the age group, the more difficult their standards are because they're working to keep the kids up to the level that their expectations are, and so they're looking for kids who can enter and know, and be at that level, and so you do have entry exams, so having backups to your top schools is important across the board, even, like, young and old, um, and I think that, there's a lot of merit to kind of doing that due diligence and working with people who've gone through that search and asking questions. And don't be afraid to ask questions on the Facebook group because that is super helpful when you're like, I don't know which one.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, Anna, thank you for being a resource to help other parents because I think your blog post will help people because you're sharing your story and
Yeah.
this interview. There's a lot of tips that you're sharing, and I know you're still active in the group and you chime in and answer people's questions because you've been on so many school tours. So you have
Yeah.
eyewitness information about a lot of schools. So I'm really grateful for you being part of the group and part of the San Antonio Charter Moms community.
I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate all the support that you gave me and that the group gave me, and it really culminated to like this fantastic school choice with the academy that we're really excited about, and I think I'll be promoting for years to come because we just um, feel like we hit the jackpot in finding it. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I hope Beau has a great school year, and then Magnolia is she starting preschool?
Yeah, she's starting at the Acorn this year, so we're sticking with them,
Oh,
and we're really excited about it. And their approach has been really great for our family, so we're excited to see her go through that too.
yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, well, I hope your kids have a great school year, and I'm really grateful for your help, and I look forward to keeping in touch through the Charter Moms group.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you, Anna. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.